It started with a scream so raw, so jarring, that it didn't sound human. It cut through the dead silence of the early morning and jolted me upright like a lightning bolt had struck the house. That sound, that gut-wrenching, blood-curdling sound, still echoes in my mind. For a split second I froze, unsure if it had been real. But when I heard the second gasp, a strangled cry followed by coughing, my legs moved before my mind caught up. I sprinted through the hallway, heart pounding, feet barely touching the floor, only one thought screaming in my head: Mum. I burst into her room and found her collapsed on the floor, curled slightly, one hand clawing at her chest, the other trembling as she tried to sit up. Her skin was ghostly pale, her lips tinged blue, her breath short and fast like she was drowning in air. And then I saw it. Her wrist was bare. The heart monitor, the device that had been tracking her rhythm for months, was missing. The very thing that alerted us to her last attack, that gave her a fighting chance back then, gone. I dropped down beside her, grabbing her hand, searching for a pulse, trying not to show the panic crashing over me like a wave. "Where is it? Where's your monitor?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. She looked at me, wide-eyed, frightened like a child. I don't know," she gasped, trying to speak between the tight, painful breaths. "It's gone. I had it yesterday." My hands shook as I dialed 911. I gave them our address through clenched teeth, trying to keep my voice level while staring at the woman who raised me, who now might be dying because someone thought her survival was optional. Every second stretched like an hour. I sat there holding her hand, whispering that help was coming, praying she wouldn't pass out. I couldn't shake the thought. Who would do something like this? At the hospital, as she stabilized and machines picked up the work her monitor should have done, the doctor's face twisted in disbelief when I explained what was missing. "She has severe arrhythmia," he said sharply. "That monitor wasn't optional. It was vital. Without it, we can't know what triggered her episode. It could happen again, and next time, she might not make it." That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat by her side, watching beeping screens, trying to breathe steadily while my rage simmered underneath. It wasn't until the next morning that she was awake enough to tell me. Her voice was faint, but each word landed like a hammer to the chest. She had been sitting outside just before dinner, enjoying her usual sunset routine, the one she looked forward to every day since Dad died. That little bench in the garden had become her sanctuary. But peace didn't last long that evening. Patricia showed up. Patricia Miller, HOA president, the self-appointed queen of our community. She stormed across the lawn like she owned the place, holding a clipboard in one hand and attitude in the other. My mum said she started ranting about HOA violations and unapproved items in shared spaces. Then she noticed the monitor. She said it looked like a child's toy. Mum whispered, still shaken. She said I was setting a bad example, wearing toys in common areas. I asked her what happened next, already feeling my blood start to boil. She told me she explained. She showed Patricia her prescription, pointed to the medical alert bracelet, even pulled out the instruction manual she always kept in her purse. But none of it mattered. She just laughed, Mum said, wiping a tear. She called me dramatic, said old people make things up for sympathy. Then she grabbed it, yanked it off like it was a rubber band. The strap broke. She threw it in her tote bag and walked away. My mother, a kind, elderly woman with serious heart issues, had begged Patricia to at least call me or speak to her doctor. But Patricia didn't care. She dismissed it all with that smug smile she's worn since the day she got the HOA title pinned to her ego. Mum tried to follow her, but her hip gave out after a few steps, and Patricia disappeared before she could even make it to the curb. Hearing that, I didn't feel anger. I felt something deeper, pure, focused fury. This wasn't an honest mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cruelty, weaponized by someone who thrived on control. And this time, she picked the wrong family to mess with. I had kept quiet before, let her get away with her absurd fines, her arbitrary rules, her condescending lectures at community meetings. I had watched her bully neighbors, slap warning notices on garden gnomes, threaten people over mailbox decorations. But now she had crossed a line. Patricia Miller didn't just steal property. She put my mother's life at risk. That little device wasn't a toy. It was a lifeline. And she snatched it away like it was trash. I went home and tore through every document I had. HOA bylaws, meeting minutes, emails, notices. I'd saved everything over the past year because, deep down, I'd always suspected she'd eventually go too far. I catalogued each absurd citation she issued, each threat that lacked board approval. The more I read, the more I realized how thoroughly she had twisted the rules to serve her own twisted agenda. She had fined Mrs. Thomas $150 for a bird feeder. She made the Nguyen family repaint their porch 3 times because she didn't like the shade of green. She had even told a veteran in a wheelchair that his ramp clashed with the neighborhood's uniform look, as if accessibility was some kind of design flaw. I started making calls. Dr. Patel agreed to write a formal letter describing the danger of removing the monitor. He called it reckless and life-threatening. I rang every neighbor Patricia had wronged. People were tired, angry, and ready to speak out. Some shared stories I'd never heard, like the single mum fined for her kids' sidewalk chalk art, or the elderly couple forced to remove their wind chimes. Everyone had something. Everyone had receipts. It was like watching a puzzle come together, and the picture it formed was ugly. Then I found it. In the bylaws, section 12.1, clear as daylight. Any board member whose actions endanger the health or safety of a resident may be subject to immediate removal and criminal investigation. My pulse quickened. Patricia hadn't just broken a rule, she had crossed a legal line. And now, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready to take her down. Not out of spite, but because no one, and I mean no one, gets to put my mother's life at risk and walk away like nothing happened. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. sharp at the community hall, the same space Patricia had once ruled with smug silence and empty stares. But tonight wasn't going to be one of her 5-person echo chambers, where she drowned out dissent with clipped sentences and a gavel. No, tonight was different. By 6:30, the parking lot was packed. Neighbors spilled out onto the sidewalks, some with printed complaints, others holding HOA notices they'd kept in drawers out of spite. Word had traveled fast. Every conversation whispered some version of, "Finally," or "About time." I stood near the front with a folder in hand, thick with evidence. Photos, letters, signatures, screenshots of messages, and of course copies of the bylaws she'd so brazenly ignored. My palms were sweaty, but I wasn't nervous. I was ready. This wasn't just for my mum anymore. This was for every person Patricia had bullied, belittled, or silenced. She walked in exactly 2 minutes late, as if the world should wait for her. Her heels clicked dramatically against the tile, and her red scarf, always her power piece, trailed behind her like a cape. She looked around and blinked at the crowd, clearly confused. This wasn't the audience she was expecting. Gone were the polite nodders and scared smiles. These people were angry, awake, united. "What is this?" she asked, loud and sharp, the kind of voice meant to regain control. "Some sort of protest?" I stepped forward, calm and deliberate. "No," I said. "This is accountability." She narrowed her eyes. "If you have issues with how the HOA is run, there's a process." "Yes," Mrs. Delgado interrupted, stepping up beside me. "And we're following it, right now. I began with the basic facts. Her unauthorized actions, the rules she never had the right to enforce, the complaints dismissed without due process. One by one, I laid them out. But I didn't stop there. I brought forward neighbors. The Nguyens showed photos of their toddler crying while his chalk art was scrubbed off the sidewalk under threat of a $100 fine. The retired teacher from Unit 4B spoke about the 2 letters he received for having a wreath on his door during a non-designated holiday. And then came Mr. Blake, the veteran who had received 3 warnings about his certified therapy dog. Each voice added another crack in the wall Patricia had built around her authority. And when I finally brought up my mother's story, silence fell like a curtain. "This woman," I said, holding up the heart monitor for all to see, "called this a toy. She ripped it off my 82-year-old mother's wrist after being shown prescriptions, proof, even a doctor's note. She laughed and walked away. That action nearly killed someone." Patricia tried to scoff. "How was I supposed to know it was real?" she said, her tone defensive but cracking. "She could have faked it." "She's 82, someone shouted from the back. "She's your neighbor." Another voice added, "She begged you to call her doctor." And then Mr. Blake said what everyone was thinking, because any decent human being would have listened. That was the moment Patricia realized she had lost control. No one was listening to her anymore. No one feared her titles, her fines, or her red scarf. Her reign was over. The vote was swift and unanimous. 62 residents voted to remove her from her position, effective immediately. We read out the bylaw sections she had violated. Each one met with nods and, in some cases, applause. But it didn't end there. Officer Daniels, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Patricia Miller," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "you are being placed under investigation for the theft of medical property and potential endangerment of a vulnerable adult. We have a warrant to search your residence." The silence in the room turned into a gasp. Patricia tried to protest, but the officer's tone left no room for argument. "You'll have a chance to explain later. For now, please step outside." The search that followed shocked even the most skeptical neighbors. Her apartment was like a bizarre museum of confiscated items. Boxes labeled miscellaneous violations, toys, and unauthorized decor filled an entire storage closet. There were bird feeders, flower pots, folded wheelchair ramps, kids' scooters, even a small American flag she'd told a family to remove from their porch. And in one box, marked discarded, was my mother's heart monitor, still functioning, still intact, just tossed in like junk. Seeing it in that box broke something inside me, but it also confirmed everything I'd fought for. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a decision, a cruel, deliberate decision to treat people like problems and their belongings like garbage. Returning that monitor to my mother's wrist felt like the world had been set upright again. She held it like a sacred object, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I thought I wouldn't wake up," she whispered. I could feel my heart racing that night. I kept telling myself it was nothing, because I had no way to know for sure. That moment, watching her cry in relief, not fear, was worth every late night, every phone call, every document printed. But the story didn't end there, because what followed was transformation. With Patricia out of the picture, the community made a radical decision. Instead of electing a new HOA president, we formed a council, 10 members representing 10 blocks. Decisions were voted on, not dictated. Committees replaced command, and people showed up, not just for meetings, but for each other. Mrs. Delgado turned her front lawn into a community garden and started giving away seedlings and flower bulbs to anyone interested in planting. The Carsons led an initiative to rebuild accessibility ramps, not just for their son, but for any home that needed it. Mr. Blake turned his experience into a program that matched veterans with therapy animals, offering training and support for free. People who barely spoke to each other before were now sharing tools, organizing potlucks, setting up rides for elderly neighbors to get to their appointments. Even the mailboxes looked different, brighter, personalized, full of holiday decorations no one had to fear being fined over. The air felt lighter. The silence that used to hover like a fog had lifted, replaced by laughter, conversation, and trust. It was as if, by removing Patricia's toxic leadership, we'd cleared a space where community could finally breathe. 6 months later, Patricia pled guilty to multiple counts: misuse of authority, harassment, and theft of medical property. The judge's sentence was poetic. 2 years of community service, specifically assisting elderly and disabled residents. He told her, "You spent years making people's lives harder. Now you'll spend years learning how to make them easier." I heard she now volunteers at the senior center, helping with grocery runs and doctor's appointments. Irony has a strange sense of justice. My mum still sits on her garden bench each evening, the monitor quietly tracking her heartbeat, while Mr. Blake's dog lies beside her feet. Kids play nearby. Neighbors wave as they walk by. And in that peaceful golden hour, I often sit next to her, grateful not just for her safety, but for everything that came after. That little beep from the monitor. It's more than just a signal of a healthy rhythm. It's a reminder that we didn't just defeat a bully. We built something better from the wreckage she left behind. And that's the kind of victory no HOA title can ever take away.